Welcome back to Monster Tamer, a 2D Pokemon-like RPG created Phaser 3. Previously, we worked on our battle scene and we added in support for loading our monster data dynamically. If you missed the previous videos, there'll be links in the video description to the source code up to this point, as well as the complete source code for this video. There'll also be links to previous videos so to catch up, so let's get started. So now that we wrapped up the logic for loading our monster party data dynamically in our battle scene, and we added in support for persisting our monster stats between each battle, the next thing we're going to take a look at is when a player gets knocked out. So typically in these type of games, a player would be considered knocked out once their party of monsters are all fainted. And so when the player is no longer able to actually battle, they would need to flee and run away. And usually be some type of consequence like losing some experience or money or even losing items. And typically what would happen is the player would then be revived in some other area, usually at like, if it was Pokemon, it'd be like at a Pokemon Center, or an inn if they need to heal the team. And so what we're going to do in our game for the time being is we're going to go ahead and add in logic to our battle scene. So then that way, once our player is completely knocked out, we'll go ahead and revive them at the starting location where the player starts the game, and we'll go ahead and heal their party. We'll also just show a message to say, hey, we healed you. And so this will go ahead and lay the groundwork for later. Once we add support for multiple areas, we can go ahead and have our players spawn in a different area and get healed by an NPC. So in order to implement this functionality, we're going to need to make enhancements to our battle scene and our world scene. And so in our battle scene, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to keep track of the player's current party. And once all those monsters are at 0 HP, they would be considered to be knocked out. For the time being, because we only have our one monster, once that monster is knocked out, we can consider the player to be knocked out. When this happens, when we transition to our next scene, we'll want to go ahead and pass some details about the player being knocked out to our world scene. And then our world scene, once we initialize our scene with that data, we'll go ahead and we can check to see if the player was knocked out, and then modify their spawn location accordingly. And then we can trigger some additional business logic. So to get started with these changes, the first thing we're going to do is let's come into our battle scene. And we're going to go ahead and add a new property for keeping track if our player is actually knocked out. And so we'll add a new private property. We're just going to call this player knocked out. And this is going to go ahead and be a Boolean. So I'm just going to copy this type real quick. Then what we'll do is we'll come down to our init method, and right after we do our skip animations, we're going to go ahead and do this. We'll do our player knocked out, and we'll go ahead and initialize this to false. So then what we'll want to do is down in our state machine, once our player actually faints, so if we go ahead and search for play death animation, what we'll want to do is if our active player monster has fainted, currently we'll go ahead and display a message that says, hey, you have no more monsters, we're escaping to safety. And so what we'll also want to do is we'll want to go ahead and set that property. So we'll do this, we'll do our player knocked out, I'm going to set that to true. And so this will work for the time being, but in the future, what we would actually want to do is if we have more than one monster, we'll check to see if there's any still available to fight. And we would go ahead and transition to the monster party scene so they can choose a new monster. But since we only have the one for the time being, we can leave this logic as is. So then what we'll want to do is when we transition to our next scene, we'll want to go ahead and pass this information to our world scene. And so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we're going to add in our data that we want to go ahead and pass. So let's go ahead and do const. We'll do our scene data to pass. We'll say equal to an object. And then what we're going to do is we'll just go ahead and add a property. We'll do is player knocked out. And we'll set it equal to this player knocked out. Then what we'll do is when we start our world scene, we'll go ahead and pass that data. And then what we'll do real quick is let's jump over to our world scene. And we're going to go ahead and add in this data type. So if we come up to the top of our battle scene, let's copy our battle scene data type. Come to our world scene, we'll come right above our scene, and we'll go ahead and add in that type. And we're just going to change this to world scene data. And so it'll be an object, and we're just going to have one type on it for the time being. It's going to be a Boolean. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and copy our value that we had here. And so we'll have our is player knocked out. Let's go ahead and get rid of enemy monsters. We'll go ahead and save. And then what we'll do is back in our battle scene, we'll just go ahead and add in our type real quick. So that way this is typed to what we want it to be. And so this is going to be our world scene data. All right, so now we're passing that data to our world scene. So what we need to do here is first, we'll go ahead and add our scene data to our class. So we store that data. And so let's go ahead and do scene data. We'll add in our type. Just go ahead and copy this. And we'll go ahead and change this to world scene data. Then in our init method, let's go ahead and add in data, and we'll pass data to our init method. And then we'll go ahead and store that on our new property. And then what we'll do real quick is we'll go ahead and add in our type for our param. And so we'll do our param. And this will be world scene data. All right, so next what we'll do is we're going to add a fallback. So if our scene data isn't provided or if it's an empty object, we'll want to go ahead and explicitly set our scene data. And so when we start our world scene from our title scene, we won't actually be passing in a data. And so we'll need to add this fallback logic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to our battle scene. And if we come up to where we initialize our data, let's go ahead and copy our block of code here for when our object keys length is set to 0. And what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and set our scene data. And so we'll do is player knocked out. We're going to set that equal to false. So if we want to go ahead and test, I'm just going to do a console log, and I'll do console log, and we're going to do this scene data. So now in our browser, if we want to go ahead and test, let's go ahead and click on continue or new game. And what we should see is after our scene is initialized, we should see our object, and we should see the player is not knocked out. And then if we want to go ahead and test from the battle scene, what we'll do is let's go ahead and we're going to update our enemy's base attack to be 25. So then that way they can knock us out fairly quickly. And then what we'll do is let's go ahead and continue our game. And we're going to want to go ahead and start a battle. And so if we go ahead and walk around in our grass until we encounter a monster. And then once the battle starts, if we go ahead and choose an attack, the enemy should attack us. We should get knocked out. And what we should see is we're going to escape. And then once our world scene starts back up, we'll see is player knocked out and it's set to true. All right, so the next thing we'll want to do is when our player is actually knocked out and our scene's initialized, we'll want to go ahead and overwrite their actual location in the game. So as we saw, after the player gets knocked out, we're still standing in the middle of our field. And what we'd want to do is actually place our player in a safe location where they can get healed. And so for the time being, we're going to go ahead and just hard code this to have them respawn back in front of their house, and we'll go ahead and heal them. So what we'll do is in our init method, we're just going to add a check. We'll do if our scene data, and we'll do is player knocked out. If that's set to true, we'll go ahead and grab our data manager, and we'll update our location. And so we'll do our data manager. We'll go ahead and grab the store property, and we'll call set. And we'll need our data manager store keys, and now we'll need our player position. And so for our position, we're going to go ahead and set this to our object, and it's going to be the same location of where they actually start at. And so for our X value, this will be 6 times our tile size. And for our Y location, this is going to go ahead and be 21 times our tile size. And so if we jump over to our data manager real quick, what we should see is these properties should match what's set to our initial location. So then after we set our player's position, we'll want to go ahead and reset their direction as well so they're facing down. And so I'm just going to copy this block of code here. We'll go ahead and paste it. And we're going to go ahead and change this to player direction. And instead of being an object, this will just be our string. And so we'll go ahead and do our direction dot down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw in a comment real quick. So I'm going to do update player location and map data if the player was knocked out in a battle. All right, so real quick, what we did here is we just added an additional check when our scene is initialized for when our player's knocked out. And when this happens, we went ahead and used our data manager to go ahead and update our player's location. And the reason we opted for this is because down in our create method, when we create our player game object, we're always grabbing our location and our direction from our data manager. And so by setting this when our scene's initialized, this will always run before our create method. And so now that we've done that, what we'll want to do next is down in our create method, after we would go ahead and have our camera fade in, this is when we'd go ahead and do any additional logic that we want to do, such as heal our player party, or even show a message to a player like, hey, we healed you, or have them interact with an NPC. And so go ahead and do this. We're going to go ahead and update our fade in effect here to go ahead and keep track of our actual progress. And so to do that, we can go ahead and provide a callback function. And inside here, we're going to receive our camera. So the camera that's currently having the fade effect applied to it. And we're going to receive a progress value. And so our progress value is going to be a number between 0 and 1. And so 0 is when it starts, and then 1 will be when the fade in effect is completed. And so then what we can do is inside our callback, because this is called multiple times, we're just going to go ahead and check our progress. And so if our progress is equal to 1, Then we know our fade in effect is completed, and now we can go ahead and check to see if our player was knocked out. And so we'll do if this, our scene data, is player knocked out. If it's set to true, then we want to go ahead and heal our party, and we'll go ahead and show a message to the player. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a comment real quick. So we'll do if the player was knocked out, we want to lock input, heal the player, and then have NPC show a message. And so for the time being, it won't be an NPC. Let's go ahead and display it in our world scene. And so what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and call a new method. We're going to do the call it heal player party. And what this method will do is it's going to go ahead and just heal all of the monsters that's in our player's current party. And then what we'll do is we're going to go ahead and show a message. We'll do dialog UI. We'll do show dialog modal. And so for our messages, we're just going to go ahead and do two messages. We'll do it looks like your team put up quite a fight. I went ahead and healed them up for you. And so for the time being, this will go ahead and work, but later on, once we actually have an NPC our player can spawn by, we'll have our NPC actually say that message. But this will at least have our functionality in place so we can support that later. All right, so now what we need to do is we need to go ahead and define our new method for heal player party. And so I'm going to come down to the bottom of our class, and we'll go ahead and add in our new private method. And so inside here, what we'll want to do is we'll want to go ahead and grab all of our monsters from our party from our data manager, and we'll go ahead and reset their HP. And so what we'll do is do const, let's do monsters will be equal to our data manager dot store, and we'll use the get method. So now we need to use our store keys. Let's grab our monsters in our party. And then what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to go ahead and type this so we have our right type. And so this is going to be our monster, and it's going to be an array. So now what we'll want to do is for each of our monsters in our array, we need to go ahead and just loop through them, and we'll have our monster. And we'll go ahead and just update their current HP. So we'll do monster current HP is going to be equal to the monster's max HP. And then finally, once we do that, we need to go ahead and re-update our data manager so we have the updated value. And so we'll have our data manager store, and we'll do set. We'll grab our store keys, and let's grab our monsters in our party, and we'll go ahead and pass in our monsters array that we have. All right, so with our changes, we should go ahead and test our code. So come over to our browser, let's go ahead and do new game. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and come up to, we're going to have battle a monster, and I'm going to save our game real quick. And so after we save our game, we should have our monster that's fully healed. Let's go ahead and walk in our grass and try to encounter a monster. Once we do, we'll go ahead and have our battle start, and we'll go have our monster attack. And so our enemy monster should still have a high attack value, so it should knock out our monster. And we should get our message about escaping to safety. And now our world scene should start. We should be outside our house, and we see our dialogue that is showing. And so it shows, it looks like your team put up quite a fight. I went ahead and healed them up for you. And so if we go to our monsters, we should see that they're still now at full HP. And so just to validate, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I want to modify our current HP on our Iguana Knight. I'm going to go ahead and do a new game again. And so we're going to go ahead and come up here. Before we start a battle, let's make sure, yep, our monster's HP is at 15. We'll go ahead and try to trigger a battle. All right, we'll go ahead and let our battle start. We'll fight real quick, so we're at 15 HP. We'll get knocked out. Now we'll show up back in front of our house. We see our dialogue, and our input's locked, and so they heal our team. Go into our monsters. We'll see they're now back at max HP of 25. All right, so then what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to go ahead and undo the changes I did to the HP and to the attack. All right, with that, that brings this video to an end, and that actually wraps up our Battle Scene Part 2 section. So in our next video, we'll start working on our new audio section, and we're going to focus on adding in our audio game objects. And so we'll add support for having our background music, battle effects, we'll have some sound effects from the players moving around our map, and we're going to connect all of our audio to our current options that we set in our settings. And so then that way we can disable the audio if we want to, we can modify the overall volume, and we'll tie all of that together. So as a reminder, there's a link in the description of the video to the complete source code for this video. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you did enjoy the video, please consider liking the video and hitting the bell icon to be notified when the next video in the series is released. For more great Phaser 3 content, please see the links on your screen now.